Welcome back to Cities in Motion. I'm Jacob, the podcast for anyone who wants cities built for people. Each week, we dig into the systems, design, and culture that shape urban life and explore how smarter transportation, better planning, and thoughtful policy can make our communities more livable. Today, I'm joined by Joe Panzarella, who's running for Houston City Council in District C. We talk about what pushed him to run, how transportation, housing, and land use show up in everyday life in Houston, and what a more people-centered version of the city would look like, from safer streets to more housing choices and better ways to get around. Let's get started. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Joe. For those who don't know you yet, who is Joe, and why are you running for Houston City Council?
Yeah, Jacob, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be on the show today. My name is Joe Panzarella. I am a Houston native. I was born and raised in Kingwood. It's a suburb just north of here. I'm an Italian American. I'm a huge soccer fan, Forza Inter. I'm an avid biography reader. I'm reading Ulysses S. Grant right now. And I'm running for Houston City Council District C for a lot of reasons, but honestly, it comes down to Houston is really hard to live in sometimes when it comes to traffic safety, when it comes to housing affordability, when it comes to the transparency of our government. It can be difficult to live in Houston, and I'm running to make it easier to live here.
Great. I definitely agree with everything that you said. I learned to drive in Houston with my dad, and gosh, that was stressful. What do you see as the single biggest challenge facing Houston over the next 10 years?
It's a good question, and I really like the 10-year timeline there because there's a lot of problems pressing on Houston right now. But I think in the long term, climate change is going to be the biggest issue facing Houston, especially when you think about how hot the summers are getting and how long the summers are now, how long hurricane season is getting and how big the hurricanes are getting as well. Flooding and heat are going to be huge issues for Houston. And we're already kind of seeing those impacts today. Luckily, I think both of those issues have a lot of solutions that are working in cities around the world. For flooding, it's about investing in drainage, investing in that type of infrastructure. And for the heat, it's about connecting neighborhoods to parks, to our community green spaces. It's about investing in green spaces and providing more of those, and making sure that shade's available to everyone. I was going to ask you, are you familiar with Houston? Are you from Houston originally?
No. My dad lived in Houston. I would visit a lot. I have not been in a couple of years.
Sure. Have you, and we can go to the next question too, but
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the Houston Arrow before?
No. What is that?
So the Houston Arrow, and I can send you a link later, it's a really unique sociological kind of like demographic thing that has come about in Houston where if you kind of map any sort of data across the city, be it voter turnout, be it average wage, home pricing, shade is one too. You kind of see that there are certain areas of Houston that have kind of developed this good human-centered development and where things are kind of working out well, but then you see everywhere outside the arrow is where things are lacking, right? Where you're lacking that shade and you're lacking that access to park space. It's something that we're hoping to solve long term.
Within that loop around the city, is it pretty livable? Or I guess there's lots of opportunities in transportation, but outside it's pretty sprawly.
Yes. I think so, and also just outside the arrow is just where things have been developed less. When it comes to sidewalk infrastructure and road safety.
Speaking of infrastructure, how would you describe Houston's transportation system today? Who do you think it works for, and who does it fail?
Who's work for and who's it fail? I think people like to dig on Houston's transportation a lot, but there are a lot of positive things about it. The Red Line is a great example. That's our light rail that goes north and south through downtown. And I think it has some of the highest, if not the highest ridership in the US for light rail, which is a really great accomplishment. And it shows that Houston can build effective and efficient transit. Some of the issues with our systems, though, is that the bus networks throughout the rest of the city can be very infrequent. For the most part, they're, every 30 minutes. And if they're late, then it's every 45. And, as most people know, that's not reliable transit if it's coming every half hour, every, 45 minutes. So I think that is an area where we can improve on a lot is the kind of frequency of transit. But also when it comes to street safety in Houston, that's a big issue where we see more street deaths than homicides. I think we saw that last year. And that's a focus that we need to really kind of lean on when we continue to develop transit is how can we make riding it safer and how can we make our roads safer?
Yeah, speaking of frequency, I mean, if you rely on the bus and you have a job at 8:30 but then the bus is late or doesn't show up, you're going to be late to work, and that has equal repercussions just because the bus isn't as frequent, either 30 or 15 or 10 minutes.
I lived in Houston without a car for about a year and a half. And whenever the bus was late or it didn't show up, and, that was kind of frequent, frankly, I would have to take an Uber. And I was lucky enough to be able to afford to take an Uber when that happened. But a lot of people can't do that. And so that's, to your point, where it's really important for the city to focus on and invest in the frequency of transit to make sure that it works for everyone.
Speaking of Houston and zoning, I guess, Houston is very famous for having very little zoning and a very decentralized development pattern. And is that a strength or a weakness or both? And how should the city manage growth more intentionally without losing flexibility?
Yeah,
A lot of
it's a great
questions. I'm
question.
sorry.
No, it's a great question, and unfortunately, the answer is a little bit of all of the above.
Yeah.
People love to talk about how Houston has no zoning, but a lot of times what they don't talk about is how much form-based codes we have within our development system, and a lot of that comes down to parking minimums and how we focus on single stairs, or single stair reform is something that we've talked about a lot, and setback requirements. So those are all things that are built into our development system that really do have a big impact on how we build in this city. And one of our key platform points is sustainable development at City Hall. And that really means aligning our form-based codes to let developers build in a way where the market is able to dictate how much parking they need to be building or how many stairs they need to be putting into a building. And that will allow us to develop more affordable housing moving forward, I think.
What would you say to a Houstonian who is skeptical that local politics can really change anything?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think local elections is where your voice has the most power, especially in a special election like ours, April 4th, where voter turnout is going to be really low. And that means your vote will be worth 10 times as much as if you were voting in, a general presidential election. I will also say my background as a community organizer, I got to see some really incredible wins when you bring together your local community to fight for something that really matters to you. A good example is I co-founded an organization called No Higher, No Wider I-10, where TxDOT was trying to either expand or heighten I-10 right through District C, right through the Heights and Washington Avenue. TxDOT is a multi-billion-dollar transportation agency. My voice against theirs doesn't mean a lot. Doesn't I think have that much impact. But what we were able to do is rally neighbors all along the I-10 corridor, bring together civic clubs and local politicians and all these folks, and we were able to bring TxDOT to the table. And so I think to your original question, local politics is where your voice has the most impact, but it requires coalition building. And that's what I'm hoping to bring to City Hall. If elected as a city council member, I want to bring the community with me to City Hall to amplify all of our voices.
We're kind of running into the same thing with I-35 through Austin. I talked to the president of Rethink I-35, and I'm sure you're running into the same issues with TxDOT and how massive the organization is. What kind of issues did you bring up when you were talking about I-45?
It's a great question. To correct you, it's I-10 because I-45
Oh,
is
I'm
already
sorry.
moving forward. No, you're
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I-45 is already moving forward, unfortunately. But I-10, no, it's a great question. What's funny about that situation is we wrote this letter that said, hey, we do not want a highway expanded through our neighborhood. We do not want a highway elevated 100 feet above our neighborhood. Can we please come together to think about a third option? And the one we proposed was putting a cap over it. And it's something that already exists in Dallas. They did Clyde Warren Park, which has become such an amazing
Yeah, I've been there. It's
project.
great.
It's amazing, right? And they're expanding it. That's how, great this project was, where they put a cap on the highway, they put a park on it. Lo and behold, Dallasites, they love this park. And so they're actually going to expand it. So we went to TxDOT and we said, can we have some sort of cap option? And we got the letter signed by local politicians from the city level all the way to the state legislature, civic clubs, all these things. And it really came down to semantics because TxDOT has a lot of strict guidelines on noise pollution and air pollution. And so I think while we can all agree that elevated and expanded highways are bad generally for our community, we really had to come at it from like what is written in TxDOT's bylaws. And for them, it's pollution. And if that's how we're able to kind of push this project, then we'll talk about pollution all day.
If you're elected, what is one specific policy or decision you would push in your first year on city council that you think would make a tangible difference for everyday Houstonians?
Have you ever read the book Paved Paradise?
I haven't gotten to that yet.
I highly recommend it. It's a
Okay.
fantastic book, but it really explains how parking is at the crux of a lot of the issues we're seeing, specifically in Houston, but in cities all across the US, which is housing is really expensive. Our cities are getting hotter. Flooding is an issue, again, specifically in Houston. And it's just not nice. It's difficult to walk and to bike and to drive around. And so much of that is because of how much parking we're building all throughout cities in the US, and again, specifically in Houston. So if elected, I think the thing that I would like to focus on the most in that first year is parking reform and reducing, if not eliminating, parking requirements citywide. Because if we're able to do that, that's going to allow developers to build more affordable housing for people. It's going to make walking more pleasant and less hot. It's going to reduce flooding in the city. And I think that is a free solution, frankly, because it's just a code change that could instantly have impacts all throughout the city.
That picture of Houston back in the day, either the 70s or the 80s, it has become pretty infamous. It's all parking.
Yeah. No, I think I forget who it was that came out with they kind of like, how do I phrase it? They went and analyzed every downtown of cities throughout the US, and they gave a percentage of how much of downtown was parking, and I think Houston's was 26% parking.
Wow.
I mean, that's a quarter of downtown, which should be the most impressive, beautiful real estate for the city. And unfortunately, it's just a lot of parking. But I think that's
Yeah,
something.
that's apartments, that's small businesses, that's everything that you need within the city core, but it's parking.
No question. And again, it's something that cities are mandating that we build more of. And so every time you have a new development, there's a line in the code that says you need to have X amount of parking spots per, and it changes per building. If it's a bar, which is always a funny one, right? That you're
Yeah.
mandating that people drive to bars. So it's something that is, I think, a straightforward solution. I think we still need to educate a lot of folks on why it's important. We let developers decide on the amount of parking and let the market decide. But it's something that if we get it right, it'll solve a lot of the issues we're seeing.
Are there any success stories that you're aware of? I guess within parking reform, what have you observed where a city has turned around and changed the policy?
Well, a great example is Austin, which is your
Yeah.
backyard. I think they're the largest city in the nation right now to have eliminated it citywide. Houston, and this is what I love to tell people too, Houston has already implemented in certain areas. So downtown, for example, no longer has parking requirements. And that's why the picture you saw from the 70s, 80s, it's a drastically different picture now in
Mhm.
downtown Houston. Midtown is another good example, which I live very close to Midtown here, where they don't have parking requirements, and we have a really healthy restaurant and bar scene here. I think it's something that's still very new to the US, and a lot of cities are still catching on to it. I'm curious to see how it works out in Austin, frankly. And you're already seeing in Austin that rents are
Yeah.
decreasing across the cities. I don't want to attribute that directly to parking reform, but
I think it has a lot to do with it, definitely.
at the very least, it makes it easier to build more of anything. But in Austin's case, y'all are building more housing than anyone, and we're seeing the rents decrease. And that's something that we want to do in District C, which is allow people to build more housing to densify the city and to bring down the cost of living here.
Of course. Sounds great.
Yeah.
I agree. Last question. The name of my show is Cities in Motion. My own definition of a city in motion is where people of all ages, all incomes can move easily, safely, and affordably, whether that's by walking or biking or transit or even driving, and where transportation system supports opportunity, not just traffic flow. Would you say that Houston has achieved that today? Or if not, what systems would need to take place for Houston to become a city in motion?
I'll start by saying that that's a great definition. And
Thank
thank you for writing that. And thank you for hosting this podcast. I think it's really
Yeah.
important that people have this opportunity to talk about these ideas that are not spoken about enough. Back to your very first question of why I'm running is that so often I don't see personally a grand vision for our cities. For me, it's Houston, and for you, it could be Buda and Austin. But I think it's really important that we have this opportunity to talk about what do we want to see in terms of transit and mobility and all these things in our cities. Again, Jacob, thank you so much for having us. How does Houston fare on your definition of cities in motion? People love to talk down on Houston. People love to call it a car city and, it's ugly and all these things. And I couldn't disagree more. Houston has a lot of amazing things going for it. And for myself, who I love to bike, Houston has one of the best, if not the best, urban trail systems in the nation. We are the Bayou City for a reason. We've got all kinds of bayous throughout the city. I live right off the Buffalo Bayou, which connects into White Oak Bayou. And it is not just for recreation, but it truly is for transit and mobility. And it's an amazing system that we have here. So I want to give a big kudos to that. The Red Line is another great example, right? When you talk about cities in motion, Houston is providing optionality there. Is there room for improvement? The issues with Houston today is that our roads are too unsafe. It's really dangerous to move around in Houston. If you're a pedestrian, if you're a biker, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're driving, it's just too unsafe. It's too dangerous to move in Houston. And I think that's something that leaders need to focus on when they get to city council. And I hope that's going to be me, where we take a look at how we design our roads and make sure that we're designing it for every user to get around in a safe way. Another thing I want to touch on too is the frequency of our transit. And I think that is a simple thing that would drastically improve the lives of working class Houstonians, but all Houstonians. If our buses came every 15 minutes, if they were directly on time, it would allow people to get all across the city in ways where they didn't need to use their car potentially. So I think Houston has a lot of great things going for it. If we can focus on the positives and build on those positives, the sky's the limit for Houston.
That all sounds really great. Well, I've been hearing a lot of great things about you. I don't live in Houston, but you have my endorsement.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Where can people find out more about you?
If you go to joeforhouston.com, you can find more about who I am, more about our platform, ways to get involved. We are having a campaign launch party on January 10th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Flat. Feel free to come by, get to know me, get to know our team. And our first block walk will be on Saturday, January 17th at 1 p.m. at Manil Park. So we look forward to seeing you out there.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to hearing more about you.
Jacob, thank you so much. Really appreciate you, man.
That's my conversation with Joe Panzarella, who's running for Houston City Council in District C. What I always come back to in conversations like this is just how much local decisions shape our daily lives, how safe our streets feel, how long our trips take, and whether our neighborhoods actually support the way we want to live. Thanks for listening to Cities in Motion. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a friend, leaving a review, or leaving a comment. It really helps.